I don't think I need to ask you if you've ever played somebody and the game was okay, and then somewhere along the way you screwed up and your opponent beat you. Not very convincingly, but at least you lost the game. And then you continue playing other people, and I'm mainly talking about the internet, because obviously if it's a real life encounter, then you will obviously immediately recognize who it is. But I mean, if you play somebody on the internet and you remember the name of the player, and then maybe a week or so later, after maybe you played hundreds of people since then, I don't know, it depends on how much you play. But then, I mean, somewhere in the back of your mind, the game's still there, and then this guy or whoever it is accepts your seek, and then you start playing the game. And already in the opening, you remember the style that he has, and you sort of hate the style. I mean, for example, this guy that I played is exactly the situation that happened to me. We played a game maybe a week before this one, and the game was pretty much the same. He played d4, I played knight f6, knight f3, e6, bishop g5, d5, knight b to d2, bishop e7, and I remember these moves almost identical, because every time somebody plays d4 against me, I always go knight f6. Sometimes I go e6, other times maybe d5, it depends, but usually for the most part I play knight f6, and then my opponent will play either c4, which is probably the most common move here, but knight f3 is okay, it's an okay move, but I think c4 is the most common move. But then, like I said, I play e6, bishop g5, d5, knight b d2, and the idea here is simply to put the knight on e5, and then, for example, if knight e5, and let's say I make a random move like bishop e7, then he puts the other knight on f3 to sort of hold this grip on e5, and then black. The only way for black is to get rid of this knight is to play f6 sometime. But you know, first of all, there's a knight on f6, and then the knight is pinned to my queen. So that's his idea, and I remember this idea from the previous game. Maybe not move by move, but I remember his handle, the name, his nickname that he's using on the internet, and so we started playing. And here I played bishop e7. I think I played exactly the same way in the previous game. And he played e3, castles. I'm not even sure if this is opening theory anymore. Okay, yes it is. Here you play knight to e5. Opening the book move here is probably the most common move. Bishop d3, c4, maybe c3, or even bishop e2, something like that. But probably the most common is bishop d3, just to get that bishop out, and then maybe at some point c3 and play e4 or something like that, just to get something going on in the center here. Anyway, so instead of that, he played exactly the same move that he played in the first game, knight to e5, and we can already see his idea. I mean, he wants to put the other knight here, or maybe in play f4, and then put the other knight on f3. So white doesn't really seem to have much of a plan, but I suppose his idea is, as in the previous game, he wants to start pushing these pawns. I mean, if there is already a pawn on, let's say, f4, and then just knight f3, and then g4, and h4, and perhaps play bishop, I don't know, whatever. It depends on how he plays. Maybe bishop h4, or maybe he takes, and when I take back, and then just g5 or whatever. It depends. And I play knight to d7. And by the way, this was a bliss game. 2 minutes with 2 seconds on each move, so everything happened very fast. And here we played f4, and already we can see, I've seen this like a billion times. I mean, I have seen so many games where people play this way. I mean, they think that there's no way to drive this knight away from e5, but you know, it's very simple. I mean, first of all, all you have to do is to remove this knight and play f6, and then this knight will be kicked off. I mean, he has to do something. Either he trades over here or he goes back. But then, you know, if there is already a knight on f3, then he has to go either here or here. So. But then I've also seen moves like queen to h5, in case this trade takes place, and stuff like that. So anyway, here I play c5, just to, I don't know, soften up the pawns, but of course he plays c3. And in one way it looks very uncomfortable for black because, I mean, he has these pawns, and it's very hard to break through. But everything depends on just this knight here and these 2 pawns here. I play queen c7. Not much thought behind that move. I mean, there really isn't much you can do in this position, obviously. Here we play bishop d3. I play b6 just to get this bishop out. Castles, bishop b7, queen f3, a6. The idea is I want to avoid something like, I don't know, bishop b5 or whatever. a6, queen h3, and already we can see that he has something going on over here on my king's side. And I play knight takes e5. And the idea here is to simply, if he takes my knight, and then obviously I have this move over here. Okay, so he took back, and here I'm forced to play this move, knight to e4, which I had seen, and I think I'd play exactly the same way, like I said in the previous game. The idea, of course, here is that if he takes, which he also did, I have this bishop over here protecting the pawn, but this pawn is kind of loose. It's very hard to hold on to that pawn, and actually in this game I should have lost that pawn, not the game, of course, but the pawn. So he took, I took back, and now after bishop takes, pawn takes, queen g4. I'll play f5. Not so much to protect the pawn, but you know, when he takes back, and I'll play rook takes, and of course he can take over here. But he for some reason he didn't do that, so he took my rook, I took back, and now rook f1, and here I play queen g6, protecting my pawn. This is actually only to protect my pawn. So he took my pawn, I took back, and now it looks like black has a very messed up pawn structure, but it's not so bad as it looks. He played rook f4, now it looks like he can just win a pawn. But here I played e5, and obviously he has to take the pawn, otherwise I can just start taking over here, and then I can put my rook over here, and so suddenly those pawns on, you know, if you go back a couple of moves, there was a pawn on f4, and you have this very annoying pawn structure for white. But now suddenly after move e5, he has to do something. One pawn has to give, so he played pawn takes, and here I play rook e8. There's no rush to try to win anything back, so rook e8. And if he takes my pawn now, then I can just take his pawn, and then this pawn on e3 will drop off the board as well. But instead he played knight c4, attacking this pawn, and I played rook e6. Kind of patient moves. He can't do anything, so anyway, I mean, okay, he was threatening this pawn, but it's not the end of the world. I played, okay, here I play king f2 in case he will go back, and then, for example, if you go back a couple of moves here, he played, yes, like I said, here, and if he's taken over here, then I can just take back the pawn, and then this guy over here will drop off as well. Eventually, maybe he could play something like knight over here, but then I can just go over here threatening this pawn, and this one will drop off anyway. Okay, knight c4, rook e6, protecting my pawn, king f2, and now bishop d5, and now he goes back, and now the idea is obvious, because now this pawn is protected, but on the other hand, now it's my turn to move, and here I simply play rook takes e5, and my pawn on e4 is well protected, and I'm also threatening this pawn over here, so he played b3. He also could play c4, but perhaps he wanted to keep c4 as, you know, outpost for his knight or something, so b3, and here I played g5. He went to g4, and here I play king f7, h3, king f6. I have to play through these moves kind of fast, because the game was 77 moves, so, and also I don't have to comment every each move. But we can see that suddenly the tide has sort of changed for black. It's not so bad anymore. Okay, the reason I moved king f6 here was his next move will be this, and again he's attacking my pawn. But it's well protected so far, and now knight g3, g6. Just keeping the knight away from, for example, h5 or something, just anything. And here I played h4, g takes, rook takes, and a5. And at about this point, we only had seconds left. I don't know, maybe 30, 40 seconds each or something like that. It was very not much time. And here he played rook h8, rook b7. And here he's threatening my bishop. And he's also indirectly threatening my pawn. So, I mean, if I ever move this bishop, then this pawn will drop off, which it actually did, but not that way. Rook b6, knight f1, rook b2 check, just a check in between. So here he went knight d2, rook b6, going back, just getting some time. And here, inevitably, I will lose a pawn. After knight b3, this guy over here will drop off because there's no way to protect. So I play a4. And here he will play knight takes e5, a3. And here he went back, and now after rook, bishop a4, knight d4, rook b2 check. King e1, rook takes e2, a2. And now he has a passed pawn. But, you know, as long as this bishop is still on the board, basically, I shouldn't trade any pieces, because so I can stop this pawn at least, and possibly win at least 1 or 2 pawns over here, and then sacrifice a piece. Rook a8, and here I went bishop d7, rook a6 check, king g5, and after rook a7, bishop f5. Okay, so after c5, rook takes, and he kept pushing the pawn, and here I played bishop g4. The reason I played bishop g4 was that, well, you know, it's good to have this bishop because it's basically the only piece that can stop this pawn in case he goes over here and promotes. Because obviously I can't go here, because then, you know, he would just take my rook, and then if I go here, it just takes time. So the bishop is actually quite kind of important here. And here we play c7, rook h2, rook takes, and now rook h7, rook c3, rook h8. So you can now see that the bishop is very important, and it looks kind of bad for black, but it's not so bad as it seems, because at any point I can just sacrifice my bishop. But I didn't have to do that. So he played rook c6, g5, rook h6 check, king g3, knight e2 check, king f2, rook takes, king takes, and now rook g3, rook takes c7, and there went his passed pawn, and now he took my g5 pawn, king takes e3, and now of course the game is lost for white. But you know, when you only have seconds left on the clock, it's not so easy to find the correct moves. And of course here, after king takes e1, he resigned. And I don't really have too much to say about this last couple of moves. He was just trying to find. Okay, I mean, it would have been very easy to stop all this. I mean, for example, I could have also used the bridge system, you know, when your king comes up, and then eventually you put the rook in between, and so. And that's basically I just blitz out this move over here, just in case that would ever be necessary. But then, of course, I also have to play this move over here, and so on. But of course, the correct move would have been, I suppose, up here. Okay, so he resigned after he lost his rook, and keep checking obviously doesn't work, because I mean, if he checks over here, I would just go close to his rook, and eventually my king will be all the way down here, and he would be just completely lost. Okay, I hope you enjoy this quick look at a game that I played, and see you soon.